Hello, and welcome back to JC's Writing Advice. I'm JC Bybee, indie author, YouTuber, and writer coach. If you want to find out more about my books or my writing coach services, you can visit me at jcbybee.com. You can also support me over on Patreon, where you can help me not have a chair that does this every time I move. So you can also visit, and I will link this down below, the Bear Lake Writers Workshop will be this October, I believe it's October 10th, where I and other authors will be teaching classes about the tools of writing. If you are interested, again, I will have a link in the description down below. So what is today's video about? We've been talking about characters and motivations and everything like that. Well, today we're going to talk about plot arcs and building your story. We're not talking, I'm not going into details of the 3-act structure or the hero's journey or anything along those lines. I'm focusing just on the building blocks of the story, where you want aspects to take into consideration as you're outlining. And we will start here. Know where you're going and why. When you are writing a book, whether you are a plotter, a pantser, what have you, you have started this story with an idea. And that idea, and I've talked about this in other videos, that idea informs where the story goes. And whether you write an outline and then write another draft and then another draft and another draft, or you spend time just writing, you need to have a rough idea of where you want to go. And the better you have that idea formed, the less revisions you're going to have to do. I've learned this with the books that I've written. There's that squeaky chair again. Because with my first book, Hero Unit, I had an idea, didn't have a plot, didn't have any idea where it was going, and I just started writing. It took a lot of work to get that story revised and into a state that it's in now. And in fact, I went back years later and re-revised it heavily. So you need to have this idea formed. And you can take notes, and all of these people that swear up and down that they're purely a pantser, I don't believe you, first off. Second off, this will help even you. So, let us begin. If it wakes, there we go. In the beginning, what do we do at the beginning of the book? Well, we establish our POV. What point of view are we in? Are we in somebody's head? First person POV? Are we third person omniscient? Are we third person limited? Are we in second person? I don't know that I've ever read anything in second person. I don't even think I could write something in second person. What kind of POV are we going to have? And are we going to stay consistent? We need to stay consistent for a reader's sake. This also introduces our characters and our setting. We introduce aspects of the overall plot, not the whole plot. We'll get to that. We're going to break all these sections down as we go along. And then last but not least, the immediate stakes that start the story. This goes in with the aspects of the overall plot, but the immediate stakes are what makes this important to our main character. So, establishing POV. First and foremost, who is our main character? In whose head are we going to be writing? On whose shoulder are we going to be sitting for the majority of the book? This isn't to say that this is the only character we're going to meet. In fact, most books have more than one scene where there is a different POV. Do I recommend juggling multiple POVs in the very first book you ever publish? Not really. Do other authors do it? Absolutely. It takes a lot of work. It is very difficult because you have to make sure that when you're shifting POVs throughout the story, you give your readers the right signposts to say, we are not in main character 1's POV, we're in main character's 2 POV, or villain POV, or villain henchman POV. That way, the reader, because again, we want readers to enjoy our work, the reader, when they have the proper signposts, can follow them and follow the story. Along with that, we ask, our readers are going to ask, why are we in this character's head? What makes them the main character? And there are lots of ways you can do that. You can make them interesting. You can make them funny. You can make them, I don't know, hateable. If you want to write a book where the main character is a terrible person and you drag the reader along as they try to figure out how is this terrible person finally going to get their comeuppance, that is a story that you can tell. It's not going to be an easy story to tell because people will only read a character that they don't like for so long before they put the book down. But it is an option and it is a path that you can follow. And last but not least, you have to give us something to care about. We have to care about this story. And whether that's tiny town in the middle of nowhere threatened by insane axe murderer. Okay? Why is the tiny town in the middle of nowhere and threatened by the insane axe murderer? Or tiny farm village at the foothills of big, huge mountains, worried that winter is going on too long. All of these things start to pique our interest, the reader's interest, so they will keep flipping the page. Next, along those lines, I should have edited this. I had to re-record this video because I was muted the first time I recorded it. Forgot to edit this. What else? Who else is important to this setting, to these characters? We have our main character. Who else is important to them? Why is the setting important to them? Because that is really important. Where are we and why? A lot of people will say, well, that's because that's where the main character is. Okay. Why is the main character there? Is this where they grew up? Is this their hometown? Is this where they woke up after they washed ashore? Is this where they woke up as they were riding a wagon down the mountainside into Skyrim? You know, the classic Bethesda opening of, hey, you're finally awake. You know, why are we in this area in this story? And further with that, how does this build the story? How does being in this spot at this time with this character start us down the path of the greater story? And that's something you really need to consider. With, for example, my book, Lost Souls, my YA series that I'm starting, we don't spend a lot of time in Sarah's hometown. I think it's chapter 5 when she leaves. I could be misremembering. Because her hometown isn't important. It is not where the majority of this story is going to take place. In fact, the vast majority of the story and actions and things that go on take place in the capital of her home empire, Trenton. So I don't spend a lot of time describing what Kensington is like. I give enough details for people to understand that it's a port city, and there's about 500,000 people in it. In fact, I think I directly state that. But that's it, because it's not important. But when we go to Trenton, the capital, I give you a description of the city. I'm going to give you descriptions of the people, the locale, and that starts to build the story, build the plot, because it is a plot important thing. And then, speaking of the plot, you give aspects of the overall plot in the beginning. Where is the story going? Or where do you want the reader to think the story is going. We don't necessarily get the straight path at the beginning. That leads to revelations later for character building for the main character, character building for the villain if you want. But you need to understand, where are we going and why? That's the next point. What makes it interesting? Why do people care? Why is this story going to pull them along? What are you going to use? What aspects of the overall plot, the setting, the characters, are you going to use to keep your reader engaged? Writing a good main character is important. Understanding their motivations is important, or at least understanding their beginning motivations. What drives them? We talked about drives and motivations in a previous video. We've talked about world building in a previous video. And all of these introductory ideas are what we use to hook our readers, to get them interested in the plot. I have another series that I'm working on. I don't actually know what the first book is titled yet, but the idea is and it's probably the wrong genre. The genres change so much anymore. I can't really follow along. Very steampunk, very Victorian in flavor. And the main character, we start out with what seems to be a murder mystery. But as the book progresses, it's going to open up into a wider plot, a wider idea of danger and risk. And the main character has to deal with this increasing threat to make it, again, interesting to the reader. Because the reader, if they have to ask, why do I care about this person again? You're losing them. One of the things I struggle with reading series is when I get to a point where I'm like, I don't care about this character. And if we're in the POV of a character that we don't care about, we're losing the story. We're losing the plot, as it were. So, if you were going to jump point of view, or your jump characters' heads a lot, you got to be careful, because your reader gets attached to the first person that they encounter almost every time. And that's the person they're going to want to follow around. So if you're going to be head jumping a lot, be careful, because it makes people not care. And when they don't care how compelling the plot might be if we don't stay consistent with our character and with the main character. I'm not saying you can't switch POVs. Don't say that. I'm saying you need to make sure that if you have established, this is who we're following, this is who we care about, this is why we care about them, and then you jump to their best friend's POV, you need to make sure that it's not going to take away from the plot and the overall story. And that leads us to the stakes. So one of the things you don't want to do is don't throw everything out there all at once. I refer to The Wheel of Time often. It's a very well-written series. I thoroughly enjoy it. But it would have been ruined if in the very first chapters we were given the entirety of the prophecies of the dragon. They would have ruined it. Because those are really hard to read, and the hints that we get throughout are not written in such a way that people are able to 100% understand them. Again, nobody knows. In fact, there's one point in the series where one of the characters argues about her interpretation of this phrase, this one part of the prophecies of the dragon. She argues that this is the interpretation that he should be taking, and yet our main character Rand has a different interpretation and goes a completely different way. And was he right? Well, the book seems to say so. But there are other times in the series where he's wrong about an interpretation, and he needs guidance about an interpretation. So to get all of this at the very beginning would have just taken us completely out. So start with your small stakes. Like I said with my other series, Ghouls and Gas Lamps. I start out with a single murder mystery. That's where it begins. To establish the world, to establish my character, to establish the some of the mechanics of the world, some of the mechanics of the magic system, and how it works, and how people view things. And I don't start out all at once with the whole plot, because you'll lose people. And then you have to make it personal. That's one of the things that sometimes gets people hung up. You have to make sure that these stakes mean something to your characters. In The Eye of the World, the very first Wheel of Time book, it seems like winter is never going to end, and people are worried. And our main character is a farmer / shepherd, and this unnatural winter is putting a stress on him in his life, and putting a burden on him, and it's suddenly personal down to the individual level. My co-host of Third Person POV, Tyler Hess, once talked about in one of our episodes, you don't focus on the global tragedy. Like, not to downplay, I'm not downplaying what happened in World War II, but 2 million people is hard to wrap your head around. But when you see pictures of individuals, that's when it becomes real, and that's when it becomes personal. So to make these things personal takes understanding your characters, understanding the world, and understanding where you want to go. And again, to my pantsers out there, I understand that the idea of planning all of this out gives you hives. But when you are writing, I want this to be sitting in the back of your mind. So as you're working and as you're taking the story along, you're naturally going to take these things into consideration. And some of the ideas will have to be hammered out as you go. And then last but not least, you need to make the stakes feel real. One of the struggles that I have with my Hero Unit series is the stakes that I have to put out for Ace are very different, because she is so powerful. I can't threaten her physically. It's just not possible, not a thing. Doesn't happen. So I have to make the stakes more about innocence, about the city, about the people around her, and how she has to act to keep them from suffering. The stakes are external to her, but still very personal to her, because she views herself as a protector. And protecting people is a very big part of who she is as a character. So if you have made the stumble, like I have, of making a character that's too powerful, you have to focus outwardly for those kind of stakes. But at the same time, you don't want it to make it feel 100% hopeless. You can make it feel kind of hopeless. In several series, you get to a point where it does kind of feel almost hopeless. But you don't want to dwell on that. You want to make sure that there is hope, that there is a path forward, that people think that there's a path forward. So we're going to continue on in the next video, hopefully later this week, talking about the middle, and I will hopefully have a video next week where we talk about the end. Continuing off of what we've built here in this video, building on our beginning into our middle and into our end, so our story stays moving in a satisfactory direction, in a way that keeps the reader interested. What that means for you as a writer can vary, and depends on your genre, depends on so many things. So if this has proven interesting, beneficial, or entertaining to you, please give a like, share this video with people who might be interested in writing, subscribe to the channel for more videos, leave a comment if there's something you want me to talk about in a future video. More than happy to look at comments and get suggestions from there. And please remember, you can find me and my books at jcbybee.com. Also my author mentoring services, well, author coaching services, not so much mentoring as coaching. You can also, again, support me at patreon.com. And with that, I will bid you good day.